Hey folks, I'm here in Bluefield, West Virginia with my buddy Jody Queen, and we're gonna do a little impromptu interview. So kind of pick his brain a little bit. So give us a brief history on your kayak fishing tournament performance. Just last couple of years, what you've been doing in kayak fishing.
Well, I've amassed a pretty good record in the last couple of years. I just try to be consistent. I like to be consistently winning. I mean,
Well, tell us about your wins.
Well, I've won the first, I think, big one that I won was the Open in 2016 on the New River, which last year was 2017. It became a trail, and I also won it, so I won back to back on it. Of course, those are my home waters, so if I don't do good there, there's something wrong with me. So,
right.
So a lot of pressure to do good on those though. And the one I just fished Saturday, which was the first trail for me in the New River, I come in 8th. I don't fish the up above Clater that much, but I usually do pretty good up there too. So
cool. So you have a upcoming tournament on Gunnersville, and yes. I noticed you got a little reading material here.
Yeah.
What other tournament prep do you have what's your tournament prep ritual? What do you do?
Man, I'll tell you, before every tournament, I take my kayak and I bring it in here. I set it up on these sawhorses, and I will take a proper size Phillips head screwdriver, and I go around and I make sure every bolt is tightened. I make sure that I've got all the things that I use regularly cleaned up. Make sure I have everything that I need for my my torpedo. Make sure everything's working well. And it's something I do once a month, and I'll take the protective wipes here that I have, and I will wipe them down to make sure that everything's good and clean before I move it. But yeah, it's just basically maintenance, and then I'll go and I'll consult my maps, make sure that the first place I go has the possibility of being a good productive spot. Try to get my a place to stay when I get there. I try to have that done before I get there. But yeah, it's become a ritual because I'm doing a trail this month every weekend. Starting, I had the national championship, which I finished 18th in it. That was the 23rd. I had a week for Easter, then I come back and I fished Saturday in the New River Trail. Next week I got Gunnersville. The week after that I have High Rock Lake. The week after that I have back to Kentucky Lake for another trail.
So how many tournaments are you doing this year total, all said and done?
Total,
including online ones.
Everything on the KBF schedule except for maybe 4 or 5. And that could change if I do real good on my trails. I might drop a couple and do some more local tournaments. But right now, it's everything on the schedule.
So how many days fishing in a year?
Counting with my onlines, even when I'm not fishing the trails or the opens, I'm fishing the online tournaments. So last year, I think I was sitting right at about 278, 280 days last year.
280 days on the water.
Yeah.
So this is it. This is what you do.
This is all I do. Well, I have my artwork too, which is kind of a supplementary thing. But this is my job. This is the offices, my water. My office space is the outdoors. It's what I do.
Nice.
And I loved it, and I've always wanted to do it all my life. No matter what I was doing in my life at the time, I've been a machinist, I've been a carpenter, I've owned my own business, I've been in the restaurant business, I've done a little bit of everything. But no matter what I was doing at the time, if someone asked me what I would want to do with my life, it was always, if I could go and fish for a living, that's what I would be doing right now. I wouldn't be doing this. And so now I'm doing it. Thanks to KBF and Chad Hoover and the new organizations like MSKA, my local organization, they've cropped up, and it's allowed me to do it. So
nice.
There's money in it sometimes.
Let's take a moment. Let's go over here to your boat, and
sure.
We're gonna just do a bow to stern.
This is the SS-127 Bonafide. These just came out this year, and I know they were much anticipated, but I've been following Luther and his endeavors with this boat since, pretty much it was conceived. But it's actually built for functionality. Some of the features on it, even the small things like the paddle holders and I talked to Chad Hoover and I said, some of this stuff's accidental. They just happen to work out. He said, nope. He said, it's all meant to be. But the hatch open from both sides. I love this feature because I can be out of the boat. A lot of times when I'm, taking a picture of a big fish, I'll go to the bank and I have access to the storage here. Like I say, it's front and back. It operates both ways. But I just love that feature. I love it. And it's good and solid. It's got a seal in it. This boat is a dry ride. But my anchoring system is an Anchor Wizard. I got the low profile on here, which I love the low profile. My buddy's got the high profile. It kind of gets in the way on him sometimes. But I'm still going to do a little more rigging on it to make it a little more user-friendly. Paddle holders, my electronics, this pod right here, the way this pod is designed, I would like to show you this because nobody's really going to believe this when I show it to them. I hate using like silicone and stuff like that. I rigged this, I've got one hole. There's no other hole in this box. I just drilled a hole there, I run my transducer in there and then run my wires out. Just double it up and run it out and then just run it around here, and there's enough room beside this box that it fits all down in there. So there's only one box. It stays dry because of the way this is designed. This is tilted forward, and when it goes in, and you see this rubber piece right here, it keeps the water from splashing up in there. And so even though there's no silicone, I know it's wet where I've been in the water, even though there's no silicone in there, no water gets inside. It's amazing. So it's still nice and clean and easy to use.
Nice. Now I know this is something you showed me and you helped me set up on my boat.
Yeah, it's the Kayak Mighty Claw with a double ball socket, 1.5 inch balls, and just mounted on the bottom of the controller. I really like this. When I first started doing this, I was having some problems with my paddle hitting it when I wanted to paddle, but it's so easy to adjust. I just take it, a lot of times I'll just take it and move it around here like this. And I can move it forward like this and just drop it a little bit, and it's not even in my way there, and it's right at my fingertips. I'm sitting here, if I want to bump it, I can bump it, move anywhere I want to with it. But yeah, I love it being there because it's the ease of use, and it's right at my fingertips. But this black pack is the one I won in the first open that I won on the New River, and back then they were doing these nice engravings and stuff, and I just took a metal Sharpie and just outlined them to kind of bring it out because it was all black and it was subdued and you couldn't see it. Nice. That's kind of fancied it up a little bit. The Omega rod holders, I love these because even though I have rod holders on my black pack, when my poles are sitting straight up in the air, if I'm on the river, I really like to have a low profile on the river and a small footprint. So I can take these rods that I stage back here, and I put 2 in the Omega rod holders, and you can stage the rods from your seat to your bow. I usually put the butts on my bar here instead of down here, even though you can see this is corrugated for the butts of your rods. It's not practical for me because I like to have access to my trays, so I put my rods up on the bar and then I can still pull my tray out and get the stuff that I'm using at the time. If I get them patterned, everything that I pattern them on is going in here because it's about hand reach.
Right.
Yeah. So I can stage everything low and I can get under the limbs. I can go in back under the big sycamore trees that are prevalent in my area here on the New River. I have my power pole here, which I don't use in the river very much. There's one spot in the river that I use it in because it fishes more like a lake. That's around Whitethorn outside of Blacksburg, Virginia over there. It fishes like, it's got big largemouth in it. They caught a 10-pounder out of there. Wow. And you just don't think about that coming out of the New River.
It's a good musky pull too.
But this works in conjunction with my Anchor Wizard, and it'll keep me stopped when I need to be. My Torpedo here, which is totally changed the way I fish. It's amazing. I know you've probably seen a few of the videos I've posted recently, but it's made my life so much easier. I mean, being able to use this in a river is another amazing thing, not just a lake piece of equipment. I was in current the other day that I know was pushing 5 or 6 miles an hour. It was only about 18 inches deep, and I hit it head on. Went straight up it, had no problems. You know, it steered well, handled well. I didn't bust bottom. I mean, as long as I watch my fish finder, and plus I know parts of the river where I'm not going to be busting stuff all the time, that helps. But I had no problem. I had confidence in it. And
you got a video on how you set this up.
I do. I have video on YouTube.
What's your YouTube channel?
Jody Queen Pro Angler on YouTube. You can go ahead and.
And you're hitting what? What's top end speed? You got a pretty good.
When I'm weighted just right, it's according to how I'm weighted. My top end usually right around 5.7, 5.7, but it's averaging right around 5.2 right now.
Okay.
Because I've got this little extra weight on here. A few other things that I thrown in the boat here recently that I didn't have when I first took it out. But it's right around between 5.2 and 5.7. And,
okay.
And the really fast stuff comes when you're going downstream, like you say, over a waterfall and the wind at your back.
But say you're on totally flat water.
Totally flat water.
No tide, no wind.
No tide, no wind. You're going to run 5.2 to 5.5.
Okay.
Maybe 5.7 on a good day.
Cool.
If you're lucky. But mostly right around 5.2. But I mean, that motor coupled with this particular boat, it's a marriage made in heaven, man. I'm telling you, it is. It just works really well with
It
it.
gets on it.
It does.
So think of the tournaments you've been in, and I want you to tell me first the biggest largemouth you've caught in a tournament, and then you can do the same for smallmouth and where they were and what you caught them on, what the pattern was, time of year. Well,
I can tell you right off, the biggest largemouth that I've caught in a tournament was in the Chickamauga Trail last year. Caught one 24 3/4 inches, and it was kind of skinny for that big of a fish. It only weighed 9 pounds and 5 ounces. I say only, but I know it's a huge fish. But that fish came off of a Cinco in the top of a lay down pine tree, and when I hooked it, you know how pine trees are. They got those little pine cones all over it, you know, and it was just, I just knew, I just knew it was good. And it looked like a spider web. It ran right back in the head of that pine tree, and it just went, and it was, it looked like a spider web. I didn't know what to do. My line was holding. I could still feel it tugging. I could see branches moving down in the water. It was clear enough for that. So I got dropped down below the tree and just kept steady pressure on it and pulled up to the tree and just started reaching down and just breaking the branches off the top of the tree. It looked like an angry beaver got a hold of that tree, man. It was crazy. And I finally got back around and got my line untangled through all that stuff, and when I got back around, it was steady pressure. I could see down about 18 inches, and I could not reach that limb. And it was too big around for me to break anyway, and I just sat there thinking, and I had steady pressure on it, and I felt something tick, and I thought, oh man, it's popped out of its mouth, but it wasn't. It had ticked off of one of those little pine cones, because it was hung on my line, and I seen the fish come up all around the limb, and when it came up, it came straight up and was going to jump right beside my boat, and when its head come out of the water, I just grabbed it and just pulled it over in the thing in my lap, so it didn't get the jump in. I got it before it could get out and jump. But it came up right next to the boat because I was right over top of it.
How long was the cleanup on that line? Did you cut a bunch of stuff and start over?
Yeah, I just pulled a bunch of it out and started all over on it. But it held. I put out a video a few days ago on a trip that I took over to the New River over there, and I caught one over there that day that was 21 inches, I think, smallmouth. And I hooked a muskie, a 40-inch muskie, and it ran me all over the place. Pulled me out in the middle of the river. They were pushing 14,000 cubic feet at the dam, and the normal is about 3,000, so it was really fast water. Had a 20-mile-an-hour wind coming upriver, pushing me against the current. I mean, again, the torpedo, man, I just shoved one of my pegs down, hit the throttle, and it turned my nose upstream into that hard current and straightened me out to where I could get control of that fish. And then I come back into the bank with it. But that line that I use, it's cheap line, and everybody else I talk to, they're like, oh, I hate that line. It does this or it does that. But it's Berkeley Vanish, and it's a fluorocarbon. It's cheap, and I have never had any problem with it, and I've used it for years and years and years.
Nice.
And so, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it for me. I mean, there's nothing wrong with, you know, the cigar, the red label. I mean, I've used it too, but that's what I use. Everything's 14-pound test except for my, you know, my jig rods, and they're 17. I use 17-pound test.
Nice.
But now the biggest smallmouth I caught was 21 3/4 in a tournament. It was a brute. I caught it also on a Cinco. I don't know, man. Everybody's like, man, I didn't even know you threw a Cinco. And that, for a long time, I didn't really use them. But when the bite gets tough sometimes, on this river especially,
right.
Oh man, I tell you, the Cinco, last year, the Cinco really brought me out.
Any particular colors as favorites?
They make a perch color in the Cinco. That's kind of different. It's kind of greenish, got a real bunch of flakes in it. But I catch a lot of them just on the purple and purple flake with green pumpkin. Yeah. And the green pumpkin black flake. I catch a lot of fish on that. Yeah.
It's a good color all around.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that, here on the New River, this is what you consider your home water.
Mm-hmm.
Give me a snapshot of a couple patterns that you know are good for this time of year. And I know it's a little bit deceptive because we got 30, you know, it's what is it? It's the 9th of April, and I'm driving down here to see you. We had snow squalls, and it's 33, 34 degrees out there.
Yeah, this morning before you got here, we had an inch and a half of snow on the vehicles out there. So,
yeah. But normally for
this time of the year, it's the start of the time of the year when you want to start throwing some top water. Jerk baits do real good, but mainly for me this time of the year, I really hang tough with those jigs. Jigs catch pigs this time of the year out of the new. I've caught some big fish, and a lot of times they're not producing a lot of small fish. But boy, when you hang one, it's usually a big one. I've already caught 2 citations in the last 2 weeks, both on jigs.
What jigs are you throwing? What trailer?
Well, I've been throwing what's the name of it?
What's the head style? Just start.
It's a football jig.
Yeah.
Paca crawl, the Paca jigs.
Yep.
Paca awesome bass.
Okay.
I love those jigs, and I used them on Kentucky Lake too.
You got any handy here to show us?
Actually, I lost my last one in the tournament down there, I think. Let's see. Maybe not. Let's see what I got here. I'm pretty sure I might have. Brian and I are going to stop at the Bass Pro on the way out. I'm going to get my pocket jigs and get some trailers.
You got any more room in there? You got any more room in there?
Man, that thing is packed tight, isn't it? Man. Jigs is what I basically grew up throwing, man. I've always been a jig guy. I love these little sand tone jigs. I kind of made that skirt out, but they're a round ball head jig, and when the bite gets kind of tough, and these things, they do not snag up, man. I don't know why, but they just don't snag. Let's see here. What's the other one at? Now this is a D&L jig. I like these real well too, and I usually use just a regular beaver style flap and crawdad on the back of them. Let me find my. I know what's in here. Here you go. Now this is my big fish jigs. That style right there, and you see they're all brown pumpkin, green pumpkin, black flake. I love a little bit of copper. For some reason on the New River, the copper seems to do really well. But my style of trailers, when early in the year when the bite's a little bit tough, I'll use these flapping styles, KBDs. This is another style that I use when the water's kind of cool. But then also when the water wakes up a little bit, you can take these. You can take this style.
Spider jig.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's basically just a twin tail hula grub. Chomper puts them out, and I'll just take the tops off of them a lot of times and just use the trailers on them.
I remember years ago at all the Walmarts, I'd always clear them out of the Jeff's Arky's crawling grub. Yeah, they had all the tentacles down the side. Like I would go up to the pin rack and just.
That's Arky.
Yep, that's it. I would find the pin rack and just get a basket and just boom, the whole thing.
That's the same way with the Arkies, man. That's what we all started on, man. We love these things.
That's cool.
And they were so bad in the river, man. We caught so many big fish on them out of the river. And this is the same style. This is also on a pocket-headed football jig, but this is a big bite baits. And they're really cheap, and I used to get them at Gambler Mountain, but they're real thick bodied, and you can throw a 3/8 head jig on it and it'll act like a 1/4 ounce bait because it falls so slow. Al Linder and that bunch up there, they'll take these big bites, these hula grubs, and put them on a chatterbait. Nice. And they do real well on a chatterbait.
I like the ribs because you can get scent in there.
Yes.
It holds on to it pretty well.
And when it hits, it creates a bubble trail sometimes when it.
Yeah.
And sometimes the bubbles will hold in there, and when it hits the bottom, when you pop it, a bubble will pop out or something like that. So, that helps a lot. I do use some scent. I use some hog sauce.
Okay.
A little bit of that. I got a few tubes of it down in here, but they were just little clear tubes. A lot of times I'll just dunk it in a bag, put it in a bag, and throw some baits in it, and just carry them around in the bag for a while, and it kind of permeates, gets into it a little bit.
Cool.
But jigs, I love this time of the year. You catch pigs on jigs this time of the year. That's just the way it is. A lot of people are throwing crankbaits right now. If you're in a tournament situation, I will throw a crankbait, and every now and then you'll pick up a good one. But if you want those big ones, slow down. Find some wood cover where the water's just a little bit warmer than the rest. Sun hitting on a wood cover or something floating in the water, wood floating in the water. I pulled a 21 incher out of a spot the other day. I pulled right up on it with the motor running. Everybody's saying, "Oh, that motor's so loud. It's so loud. It's scaring fish." I never shut that motor off one time when I was fishing the national championship this year. I came from 51st place to 18th, and it was all because I didn't shut that off the last day. I run from spot to spot, everywhere I thought there might be a fish. But the other day I pulled up on some floating wood, had a log in it, had some stuff floating around it. It had current flow where I was at. I just shot over. I put this down real low, like a 3 watts, and it was holding me in the current. I just pitched that jig over and it fell right down in it, and I popped it one time and pulled a 21 incher out of it with the motor running.
So
I don't know.
Let me ask something. I'm jumping ahead a little bit in my interview questions, but do you consider yourself more of a finesse or a power fisherman naturally?
You know, man, I think naturally I'm more of a power fisherman. Some of my friends might beg to differ. I've done it both so much that it's hard to.
So if you're power fishing and you're in a tournament, and power fishing was working in pre-fishing, at what point do you say, it ain't working, I gotta slow down? What does that decision process look like?
Man, there's a couple different factors that will go into that. If I'm starting to see fish, if I'm in deep water and I see, like if I'm running from point to point or whatever, when I'm power fishing and I'm crossing fish that are staging somewhere or just not moving very much, if I'm not seeing a lot of bait moving, I'll stop the power fishing sometimes. If I'm not catching fish on it, then I've got to change. If I'm throwing spinner baits or something and I'm catching them on spinner baits, I'll stay with it. But if I'm not, believe you me, I will stop. And it doesn't take long. You'll know within, first hour and a half you're on the water, hey, they're not hitting this bait. I mean, if you're in areas that as an angler and you've been on the water a lot and you're like, man, I know there's fish there. Everybody gets that feeling. That's just too good of a spot for there not to be a fish. If you get that feeling and you're working those same areas over and over and over and you're not catching fish, you're doing something wrong. Go ahead and change. Don't be afraid to switch over to, you know, a Cinco or a Ned rig or, you know, some kind of finesse bait. Just do it. I switched to a rooster tail. They make a 1/6 rooster tail, and when times are tough, when the cold fronts move in, you can take a daggone rooster tail and catch 14 and 15 inch smallmouth all day long on them. Nice. When nothing else will hit them.
Right.
So you just never know.
Right.
But yeah, if it's not working, change.
Yeah. So with the New River being your home water, and I know you love fishing it, is there a place that's away from home, it's not your home water, that's your favorite place to fish?
Yeah, up there in your back door. I love the Susquehanna, man.
Yeah.
It's an amazing place for numbers. The build of the smallmouth in there, for whatever reason, they're just a wider fish. They look like saw blades. I mean, they're the epitome of the phrase football. They're wide, they're big finned, they're wide tailed, and they fight great, and they'll hit anything you throw in front of them just about, if you can just catch it at the right time. But
yep.
If you want a 22 or 23 inch fish, I'm not going to send you to the Susquehanna. Not saying that there might not be one in there, but your best chance for that's going to be on the nude. It just is.
Yep.
But if you want numbers, I went up there, 4 times last year. Every time I went, we're catching 17 and 18 and 19 inchers a day.
Yep. That's what that river is.
And it's just one after another. And I mean, if you want to gain confidence in a bait, go up there. If you're just thinking, well, I threw this bait on this river, but there's not that many smallmouth in it. I don't know if I'm working it right or whatever. Take a bait that you're not used to, go to the Susky, throw it, work it different ways, and see what's most productive, and you'll gain confidence in that bait. And you'll know how to work it when you leave there.
So on the Susquehanna River, what's your favorite pattern, favorite thing to throw?
Top water.
Yeah.
Yep.
Specifically?
Plopper.
Yeah.
I plop that place.
You like the 90, the 110, or 130?
130 all the way.
Okay.
Don't use no small stuff up there.
Yeah, ask Russell Johnson about that 130 up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
He struggles with it. He gets him to eat it, but he didn't get him in, and he's frustrated. And I've had the same problem. I have him break the 90s. I have him to throw the 130s,
yep.
But the 110s, it's like Goldilocks. That's
the 110s work great. The problem that I was having with the 130s when I first started throwing them was, man, they throw those baits. I mean, it's just, and you have a 50% catch ratio on them. So, the way I overcame that, I used a slower tipped rod,
right.
And I put
Modern
on
action.
Yes, and I put on the triple grip mustads. I have no problem. The last time I threw a 130 on the Susky, and I was doing this to prove a point to my friends. I caught 24 fish, and I think I lost 2
right
at the whole day, but I caught 24 that day, all on the plopper.
Nice.
So that's a 90+% catch ratio, and I wasn't getting near that before I switched the rods.
Right.
That soft tip, it helped tremendously because they can't get that thing going and flopping. I mean, it helps, and those triple grips really help.
So what do you make of the motors and tournament debate? What's your take?
Everybody's got...
I already know what your take is. You got Torquedo on your jersey, Torquedo on your boat, Torquedo logo everywhere. You're all in, but
there's a lot of guys, and I mean, everybody has the right to their opinion on it. And guys, this is what we're doing here with the KBF. It's not you don't get out there in a yak skin kayak and a seal skin kayak. That's not what this is. This is competitive fishing. This is, as an angler, I want to do this for a living. I want to be most competitive angler that I can be. To keep up with the pedal drives from the Hobies and you know, those boats can cover a lot of ground. You know, when I first started fishing competitively, I was in a Jackson Coosa, and you know, it's a great riverboat, but I mean, I'm in on these big lakes and I just can't compete. But for me, it's about competition in this field. Now, there are groups out there who don't allow motors, and that's fine too, don't get me wrong. But most of the time, it's the camaraderie, and not saying that there's no camaraderie in competition, but these groups are smaller groups, and they fish locally, and it's guys getting together and fishing for a little money on the sides, and it's different. At this level, you cannot compete, or it's very hard to compete if you don't have the equipment. You're only as good as your tools will let you be. Brian and I, my buddy Brian Aliff, I mean, we fished all these tournaments when we first started out, and we did okay in them. But all the time we were fishing them, we're watching these guys with the motors, with some sort of trolling motor, or the pedal drives, like the Hobies. Those guys are dominating the sport. I mean, that's just a fact. That's just the way it was. And now it's starting to change. The money's getting bigger in this sport. It's just not about kayaking and paddling. And there's not to say that there's anything wrong with that. I'm all for it. And you know, a guy had a post on Facebook not too long ago, and he's talking about, I can't believe they allow motors. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do this. And I usually don't respond to things like that, but I did respond to that one because, you know, I responded in a way. I told him I would love for you to start a non-motorized tournament trail, and I promise you that I will try to get into one or two of them with my paddle boat, because I don't mind it if everybody's paddling. That's fine. But to try to take a competitive fishing platform like the KBF, where you're fishing for thousands and thousands of dollars, and you're paying your bills with that money, and it's a totally different platform. That's not what the KBF is, and some of the other, not just the KBF, but some of the other ones too. KBS, I guess they allow torpedoes and stuff like that, but it's just different. It's not made for, we're not out there trying to be, I don't see nobody out there in a sealskin yak. I mean, if you want to be original and you want to go back and you want to be authentic and stuff like that, there's nothing wrong with that. Just don't expect to be all the competitors in this sport with KBF and the other ones that money we're going for. That's not who we are. That's not what it's created for. That's not what we're about. So, you know, there's going to be a time and a place for it. If you want it, go do it. You know, but this is not what we do. It's something different.
So I feel that fishing is a lot about learning each time you get out. In some of the greatest joys that I've had in fishing is just having those aha moments and having things sort of click. In all of a sudden you're a better fisherman because you figured something out.
Yeah.
Think of something you've figured out in the last year that was one of those moments that really made you happy, one of those big lessons that came to you and, you know, made you a better angler.
And one of the biggest lessons that I learned, or one of the things that I found, and it was an aha moment, because I got to thinking about the smallmouth on the New River over here, and when the water gets milky and everybody's like, oh yeah, spinnerbaits. Well, that's fine. I was throwing a spinnerbait, a double willow leaf, or a willow leaf with a Colorado combination, and I was catching fish on them. You know, the white skirts, the KVDs, the Strike Kings, the War Eagles, they're all like my favorites. And they were smaller finesse spinnerbaits, and I was doing pretty good on them. The bite was starting to run out on that, but the water was still muddy, and I was like, man, I just thrown this yesterday. I know that they're going to hit spinnerbaits. I need to do something to my spinnerbait to change it up. So I started thinking about the things that you normally do, like throwing gold blades in muddier water, and even with my jig skirts, I throw a darker jig, you know, black and blue in muddy water. So I didn't want to go the black and blue route, so what I did was I went with a black and brown banded because it looks like a rock bass.
Right.
And not just, you know, a crayfish, but it looks like a rock bass if you're pulling it through the water. I mean, it could be mistaken or thought of as a rock bass bite. And I changed my blade to a single number 5 Colorado Gold blade. Matter of fact, I've got the spinnerbait right here. Now this is a 4.5 blade, but for whatever reason, this black and brown band, this has got a little bit of green in it, and sometimes I'll use a copper skirt with it too. But that darker blade, with that right there, man, I started busting them. A friend of mine, which Brian, he came up to me. We was fishing a tournament down there on Bluestone, and he came up and said, "Man," he said, "are you catching anything?" And he was throwing the same spinnerbait I was, except he didn't have the blade or the skirt. And I said, "Yeah," I said, "I'm doing okay." And he said, "Man," he said, "I've got like one bite today." And I just threw him a skirt, threw him a blade. About his second or third cast, he pulled in a 20-incher. I mean, it was just that little thing, which was a huge thing in the end. And it was just that blade is just thumping, pow, 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 pow. You can feel it pulse when you're pulling it in. It shakes that skirt. It just does, I mean, the action. And if a fish is using its lateral line in muddy conditions, you want all the noise you can get out of it. And that was just a ticket, man. And they love it. I've started throwing this when the water's a little greener and you see 2 or 3 feet, still the same thing. You're still catching fish on them.
What's the brand?
This is actually a Strike King spinnerbait. It's a KVD model, pro model. And I just put my own skirt on it that you buy from Bass Pro Shop. And you can get the Hildebrandt blades from Bass Pro Shop. And man, my aha moment, and I spent all spring catching fish on these things. I won the New River Trail. Actually, my biggest fish come off of these right here, the spinnerbaits.
Nature tends to talk to us and tell us things about what to do, where to look, and when to slow down and pay attention. What signs in nature do you pick up on, and you know, how do you learn from nature signs, what it's telling you about where to fish, how to fish?
You know, I have a lot of people who like watch the signs and having the moon over the top at a certain time and the solar tables and they work to a certain extent. But I've just always, I don't know, I've kind of winged it a lot. I know that, you know, when the barometer's low and steady, it seems to be a good time to fish. It never has really dictated, other than topwater, what I'm throwing. I mean, if it's cloudy and rainy out and a dark day, I'll throw topwater. You know, it's just never, now in the cold, when it gets cold and you know you're gonna have to finesse out some fish or a reaction strike, then you change accordingly to that, you know, the cold fronts. But I've never really had a pattern of doing the same thing with a certain weather condition. I've always just gone with the baits that I've thrown and tried to figure out the pattern no matter what was going on. Now there's some things that dictate what you throw, like muddy water. Of course, we just discussed, you know, spinner baits in muddy water, dark jigs and black and blue jigs in muddy water. I mean, those are all great. But as far as letting nature tell me what to do on a regular basis, I kind of push the limits on it. I kind of just try to do my own thing and figure it out on my own. And I've been okay, been pretty successful at it so far. So
something that I noticed just kind of looking around here and seeing the different artwork you have, and one of the first comments when I walked in here where you live here, it was that Jed Plunkett would love this place.
I would love to get Jed down here.
But it kind of brought out a thought that a lot of the really great anglers that I know are also artists. And I think it comes down to that ability to focus. I think to be a good artist, you have to have a tremendous capacity to focus, and that also translates to fishing.
Yeah, I think that helps. I really do. I'm with you on that.
Tell me about your artwork, though.
My artwork is I do photorealism, and you know, it's just one of those really tedious types of artwork. I mean, I'll spend. My buddy Gary over here, he's a painter, and I mean, I've seen him take a canvas in 45 minutes and paint something and sell it for $4 or $5 grand. You know, I've seen him do it. He's just, that's who he is, and he gets tickled at me because I'll be for 2 hours on a 1-inch square. You know, and he's like, man, there's no way I could do that. You know. But that tediousness, I think it bleeds over. I mean, being able to focus on something like that small for a long length of time, I think it really helps you, especially when you're finesse fishing.
Yeah.
I mean, you get that focus, and being able to stay there without getting I'm out of here. You know, I'm gonna go do something else. Or sometimes it pays off to be able to do that. So yeah, I think it bleeds over into the fishing arena, and I think it really helps. Some of my pictures, I've got 120, 130 hours, 140 hours in them.
Show me some of it.
Okay. This is some of my work. This is I call this one.
Let's lay it down here where we get good light on it.
I don't know if you can see that or not, but the detail and like the skin and all the textures. I think that drawing is like real life. I mean,
that's with a pencil.
Yes, this is all pencil, all graphite pencil, and I use mechanical pencils. All the way down to 0.3, and it's really tough to keep them from breaking when you use them.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, it's as fine as a hair, and when you're doing some small stuff like that, then I mean, and it's always sharp. So if you take a wooden barrel pencil, you're always sharpening it to try to get that fine line out of it. Mechanical pencils are always sharp. You never have to sharpen them. So you can really get those really sharp lines. Sharp lines are focus. I mean, it just focuses everything. If you got the sharper your line is, the more focused the picture is going to look. But that's my disgruntled alarm clock. He looks like he's aggravated.
Yeah.
This picture here, I have about, I don't know, I've got about 140 hours in this picture right now. And it's, this is of a baptism. My family is there's a lot of Baptist ministers in my family. This is actually my second cousin, and this is my uncle, who is baptizing a friend of mine I've known for about 30 years. And the look on his face, this come from a picture. I drew it from a picture, but the look on his face, my wife took this picture, and I said, I've got to draw that. I've got to draw this. And I did take some artistic liberties. I put the water in and stuff like that. But it was just an amazing, powerful picture to me, the emotion in his face, so I had to draw it.
You had to.
But
we talked about that earlier. The artist.
It's you know, and fishing is the same way with me. I have to. It's something that I have to do. It's a release. I don't know if it's therapy, which I'm sure it is in some aspects, but it's just something that I feel that I have to do. And my artwork is pretty much the same way. I did a picture for the national championship. Would you like to see now it's not the actual picture, but it is a picture almost exactly like the picture that's going to be given to the champion. Would you like to see it?
Yeah.
I'll bring it in here. It's on the drawing board right now. If you'd like to, you come in here and So this is actually, you can come around here if you like. is actually me on the Susquehanna in my kayak, up around Liverpool, I think. But I mean, that's the beginning of it. I have the championship seal down in the lower left corner. When I pull that off, I've already got the seal drawn out. It says national championship or national champion. Now, I've already done one picture of this, and I'll get you a photo of that later. And it hasn't been presented to the champion yet. And Chad's going to actually do that pretty soon.
That's awesome.
So I can show you the finished piece. There's probably, I do things in layers. There's probably 7 or 8 layers of lead just in this dark area right here. And I mean, it's just one layer after another. Keep going layers, layers. And pretty soon all your marks disappear and it looks just like a solid piece of black.
Yeah.
You know, and I use Bristol, which is a real smooth tooth paper, so you're not getting a lot of bumps in it. So it looks smooth. The smoother you want something to be, like if you're doing surface of the water or something like that, the smoother you want the tooth of your paper to be. So
nice.
It gives you that texture. It's all about texture. If our faces didn't have texture, you wouldn't be able to recognize anybody.
Right.
Because they look different every time. I mean, your face has to have the features of your face cast shadows. It's what makes us up. It's texture. We're all made of textures. That's what gives us definition.
Cool.
We were talking about artists being great anglers, and there's a definite pattern. That is a definite thing. I know it is. I mean, you got Jedediah Plunkett. He's a great artist. I mean, I've seen his stuff. It's great. He's a tattoo artist. Chase Tanner. He's got some great paintings that he's done. That dude can rip on a guitar.
Huh.
He's classically trained musician.
Never knew that.
Yeah, he's a brass man, but he also plays. He's got a nice old electric guitar. I think it's a '65 Stevie Ray Vaughan Strat.
Really? Cool.
Man, I'm telling you, he's good too. We sat up there. I took my guitar over, and we sat and played one night. And we had a great time. Him. Of course, I do a lot of artwork. Brian Ailiff, man, he paints on turkey feathers.
Huh.
Some of his stuff is just, it's that tedious stuff too.
Right.
And if you've ever seen Brian, if you ever see him on a lake when he's finesse fishing, I've seen him fish a log that looked like a landscape timber for an hour, and he catches fish.
Huh.
I mean, but I've seen him slow down where he's slower than fog off a goose turds. But I tell you, man, he can really tear a log apart sometimes. Focus. But he's got that focus.
Yeah.
And he's like, he makes turkey calls, man. He was like, come in one year, he had a first place and a third place at the National Wild Turkey. On a national level. I mean, he's really good. He makes his calls. His calls are great. But he's got that artist bone, man. You know.
Cool. So I need to wrap this up, but I kind of wanted to put something out there just as a wrap up. Anything else you wanted to share? I'm just gonna leave it wide open. Something you want to talk about, with all the kayak anglers that'll watch this.
I do this a lot on some of my videos. There's a few things that are real important to me. I like get involved with the charity. I do some. Chase Tanner does the breast cancer, the Barbie doll, or the Barbie pole fishing thing. That's a great thing. Something like that in your local community. Get involved with some kind of charity. I am an artist at a nonprofit. We do a lot of things for our community. Get involved with your community. HOW is a great organization. It's Heroes on the Water. Find a local chapter. Fish their tournaments. They're going to get reacquainted with KBF, I think, this year or next year. I think they're working on that. Support that. That is a great program. You can go online and their web pages and find stories of some of the veterans that it's helped and how they react to being out on the water. It's a sense of freedom. It's great. It's a great thing. Take somebody fishing. you know, if you want to there's two ways to get to know somebody and really know who they are. My grandmother used to, I said, Grandma, why, when a stranger comes into your house, why do you immediately set them at the table and put food in front of them? She said, if you ever want to get to know somebody who's coming in your door, sit and talk to them while they're eating. Fishing is the same way. If you want to get to know somebody, you know, introduce them to fishing. It'll change their life. You get to know them, and it's just it's a great sport to get into. You don't have to be competing. You can be paddling. You can be, you know, SUPs, non-motorized, whatever. Just get somebody out fishing, because it furthers and protects the sport. The more people that are in the sport, and the more people will love it.
Cool.
And always wear your PFD. At a Georgia tournament last year, I was up till 4 o'clock in the morning looking for a guy who had capsized, and they'd been down that river for 13 years. He owned a canoe livery at the head of the river, and unfortunately the night before we had some storms and a tree had fallen over, and I'd remarked to my buddy that day when we were pre-fishing for the tournament, I said, man, if you didn't know that strainer was there, it could be a bad place, because that's the only place that if I was in a canoe or a kayak, I would want to come down that side. And they did that night. It was after dark. They didn't know it was there. The guy didn't have a PFD on. And when the searchers, the game warden showed up, and they were asking us, you know, if we've seen anything and all this stuff. And I said, man, I know where a tree fell up here if you didn't know it was there. And I went up there and checked. There was debris there from the boat. There was a cooler. There was a canoe that had been pulled up on. One of the survivors got out, and that guy was lost. If he'd had his PFD on, he probably would be alive today.
Yeah.
And there's stories like that, you know, from the national championship. We had a guy who, if he hadn't had his PFD on, you know, Ken Wood, it's a harrowing experience to be in that situation. But he had a PFD on, and if he hadn't, he probably wouldn't be here today. So PFD is very important. Don't matter if you're competing, just paddling. If you're out there wade fishing on a river or whatever, have some type of, you know, approved flotation device.
Just wear it.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I appreciate you taking some time with me. I've enjoyed it.
Always
seeing where you
man.
live and hearing your stories, and I'm looking forward to getting on the water with you tomorrow.
It's gonna be great, man.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Jody.
Yes, sir.